everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I am your host Muriel, and in this video I will be doing a review of the Book of Elsewhere, co-written by China Miéville and Keanu Reeves. Or, well, let's be honest here, mostly written by China Miéville, really. And that's precisely why I bothered to pick this book up in the first place, quite frankly. I wanted to read more Miévillian fiction and was actually a little worried there wouldn't be enough of that in this book, because no offense to him, I don't really care about Keanu Reeves' Berserker character, universe, what have you. I've enjoyed some of his movies, yes. The Matrix was some trippy fun and weird and hard to understand, whatever. And he's definitely fun as Johnny Silverhand in Cyberpunk 2077, although that character is a bit of an asshole, but that's about it. Still, I will give him this: excellent taste in pseudo Ghost Riders. But so yes, that was my chief concern. Would this book feel like an actual China Miéville book? And then outside of that, I didn't actually research this one much beforehand. I knew about the Berserker character, and that's about it. So I mostly went in blind, and was pleasantly surprised for a change. Yay! Because, spoilers, I mean, not really, but yes, I can confirm this is a China Miéville novel more than anything else. That grew out of a basic idea provided by Keanu Reeves, sure. That basic idea being that of an immortal warrior named Unute, sometimes referred to as B. He's the aforementioned Berserker, for which Keanu Reeves also had a comic book series or graphic novel commissioned? I'm gonna go with that. In the Book of Elsewhere specifically, Unute, the immortal warrior, works with the US military as an actual soldier, though, of course, you know, they don't deploy him with the regular army, he's like a special forces guy. And then he also works with the US military as a research subject, within a super secret, highly classified subdivision of, well, DARPA, I guess? It's never named as such, to be clear, but that's what it must have been, right? Now, Unute essentially functions as an independent, free agent. The military can't actually control him, right? Because, A, he's immortal, and they want to crack that shit so they can create super soldiers. So the bargaining power is definitely in his favor there, and besides B, Unute goes into these insane, berserk rage states during which he becomes an unstoppable killing machine. So why does he go along with any of this, you ask? Well, Unute's 80,000 years old, he was born in freaking prehistory, and he'd like to be able to die, is the gist of it. He's not actively suicidal, and I mean, there are people who actually ask him this, like, do you want to kill yourself? He's like, no. I'd like to have a finite life like everyone else, and so he figures working with uber-smart military scientists will help with that. So the story revolves around him in a present timeline and in flashback chapters that take place during various periods of history, features the points of view of different characters working with Unute, including military personnel and specifically a female scientist named Diana, and kicks off when the body of a fallen member of Unute's field unit comes back to life for a hot minute, and an immortal Babirusa, a species of wild pig, which Unute has had an ambiguous relationship with for thousands of years, shows up again out of the blue. Unute's pretty much seen it all, but he's never seen a dead person, well, you know, other than themselves, actually come back to life. The newness of this and the stacking coincidences elicit his curiosity and the curiosity of the people working with him. So the Book of Elsewhere focuses strongly on mystery as a plot device, and then conflicting factions, cults, and tantalizing bits of higher stakes mythology, shall we say, around Unute and his, what I like to call his Babirusa frenemy. Like I said, the Book of Elsewhere unfolds through two separate but related narrative strands. A present narrative strand made up of named chapters that each feature several different points of view, all written in third person limited, and a past narrative strand that focuses on Unute and his history, but is also itself further divided into two groups of chapters. The first being a collection of testimonials from various people Unut has encountered and impacted throughout the ages, written in first person. The second being a collection of vignettes directly focused on Unut throughout the ages and written in second person. Yes, as if Unut were retelling his life story to himself, so it has a pretty omniscient feel to it. Now, I know a lot of people don't really like second person, rare as it is, but I don't know, I thought it added texture to the narrative in a way that just worked. The prose, for its part, felt fundamentally Miavillian, with usage of varied but exact and, well, favoured vocabulary. The word palimpsest dutifully showed up in the text. If you know, you know. I never struggled to picture anything, and the text had a very nice flow to it, even when it dabbled with stream of consciousness in places. The key words here being in places, and then also sparingly for specific effect, which again worked very well as far as I'm concerned. I'll add that I think Mieville did a good job of juggling both a certain mythical tone in this story, given Unut himself is, yeah, kind of a mythical figure, having lived 80,000 years, that tracks, and secret military department conspiracy tone, if that makes sense. I guess you could also just call it mystery thriller vibes within the government, broadly speaking, in the sense that Jeff Vandermeer's Authority, so book 2 in the Southern Reach trilogy, has mystery thriller vibes. Yes, I was actually pretty strongly reminded of Authority specifically while reading the Book of Elsewhere, which was absolutely to my liking. Overall, I think the character work was perfectly fine for what the story needed. Sufficiently fleshed out where the supporting characters were concerned, good and convincing enough where our main character, Unut, was concerned. And this is actually pretty praiseworthy in itself because in my experience, writing an immortal, old as fuck character isn't exactly easy to do. In fact, I remember mentioning this exact thing in relation to Animander Rake when I tried to get into Malazan Book of the Fallen last summer. If you want to know more, you can check out the reading blog I did about that experience. It was not good though. There was something appropriately removed or distant, very pragmatic, but also, yes, wise, kind of, about Unut in a way that still allowed for him to feel like a human individual. He still had a personality, basically, but also felt different, as you'd expect, to some extent at least. The book's other characters were fine, like I said, with just enough complexity and, in this case, grayness to feel believable as people, and then also believable as people working for a super secret military program, I guess. But then again, not my area of expertise, so anyone is obviously very free to disagree with this. And then I'd be remiss not to mention the Babirusa of it all. I like the deer pig. Yeah, and its relationship with Unut. It didn't talk or anything, to be clear. It wasn't that kind of fancy, but it had a personality in its own way. I don't know, it just added something pleasantly flavorful to the story for me. Genre-wise, the Book of Elsewhere is essentially weird. I mean, what did you expect? Weird fantasy, since Unut's powers derive from some sort of godly magical force or entity, the exact nature of this force or entity being part of the mystery of the story. This is what he tells the reader at any rate. 80,000 years ago, his prehistoric tribe was under attack, his mother prayed to the heavens for deliverance, and zayap! She was struck pregnant with Unut by a big blue bolt of supernatural lightning. And then this is also how his frenemy, the immortal Babirusa, was conceived. Literally, because Unut witnessed his Babirusa herd? Is it a herd of pigs? I don't actually know. Pig praying to the heavens for a magical warrior, which in Pigland presumably means an individual who will be able to defend the herd and its territory from competitors. So yes, non-human animals in this story are implicitly shown to possess human-like awareness and, well, a spiritual connection to the wider world, which I honestly loved, because then Unute also mentions having seen other species of animals, alongside other groups of human beings, trying to invoke the supernatural blue lightning at various points in deep time. Alas, to no avail in their respective cases. But then nothing more was ever really made of that element in the story as a whole, which I found a little strange and disappointing. Be that as it may, there's definitely a quasi-mythological aspect to the Book of Elsewhere, which comes to the fore in Unute's flashback chapters, and then towards the end of the present-day narrative, when some of the mysteries surrounding Unute's immortality get resolved, well, more or less. I wouldn't say rock-solid answers are ever actually provided by the text, not that it really bothered me in this specific case. Otherwise, the story mostly takes place in our world, as it is, so there's not really much to say regarding its greater world building, outside of the fact it does play a little with the idea of deep time and historical or, archaeological conspiracy theories. The kinds of conspiracies that look at, say, the Great Pyramids of Egypt and other such sites and argue in favor of the existence of an ancient, super advanced civilization that, I don't know, produced electricity and whatnot. I think there's been one literally with the pyramids, that there was a cavern under it that had generated something. Shit gets crazy on the internet, am I right? Atlantis type shit, and all that rather silly jazz. Except here, Unute kind of confirms some of these conspiracies by casually dropping bits of information about great civilizations that rose and fell long before the agricultural revolution, or the Neolithic revolution, and the scientists around him don't really know if they can take this at face value or not, because whilst he's not really the kind of guy to troll them for shits and giggles, he does have a sense of humor, but he's not that kind of person, they can't exactly prove any of his claims, materially speaking. There is just no archaeological evidence to back up his claims, but, they think he's telling the truth. It was a really small part of the narrative, mind you, but I don't know. I thought it was amusing. A playful little wink, if you will. For the sake of completeness, I'll add there were convincing snippets of, historical setting writing, if you will. An engaging mystery thriller of sorts, like I said, set within the confines of secret military departments, and a certain dabbling with religious cults. Something which features very prominently in Mieville's Kraken as well, and which I found, yes, decently fleshed out here. I think you could have had a bit more of every one of those elements, yes, and I certainly would have enjoyed more deep lore, specifically where Unute was concerned, but overall, the world building was just about good enough for this kind of story. Most of all, though, I was pleasantly surprised by the fact there was a respectable amount to chew on in this book in terms of theming, which I'm going to divide into 4 points. For starters, I mentioned Kraken just a moment ago in relation to religious cults, but it is also relevant in that both it and the Book of Elsewhere examine belief and the religious practices that arise out of belief, and faith in the supernatural, or the awe-filled natural one can't explain, as the case may be. It's definitely a much bigger theme in Kraken, and it's developed with more depth, and it's just also a lot more fun. Anyway, but I could not mention it here, given all the religious cults Unute encounters throughout the ages that center directly on his very own person, or his frenemy, the immortal Babirusa, and more crucially, the misinterpretations thereof. And then given the role some of the descendants of these cults play in the story and the resolution of its mysteries, or partial resolution of its mysteries. Then there's the meaning of life and death, and the dynamic relationship between the two, which I guess you'd sort of expect from a book that features an immortal character who wants to be able to die so prominently. The text, through Unute, interrogates what it means to be a living being, what it means to be able to die, or not, as a living being, what meaning might be taken away from life if one is unable to die, etc., etc. It then also poses the following question, which I really enjoyed personally. Are life and death actually opposites, enemies even, Or might they simply be two facets of the same fundamental existential force? A tentative answer, which I also personally really like because it kind of aligned with what I believe about this, yes, is actually kind of provided at the end of the book, but I won't spoil it. Time and its meaning is also explored through Yu Newt's unnaturally long life experience, and of course in conjunction with the question of life and death. What does the passage of time mean when you know you can't run out of it? How do you stay motivated to do or learn anything when you literally have all the time in the world to do whatever you want? There's this one very specific moment in the book I found really interesting and well done in terms of, well, characterizing an immortal being, wherein Diana, the scientist closest to him, asks Yu Newt why he bothers to listen to vinyl when he could just download all of the world's music onto a digital device and thereby save a lot of time. Yu Newt then proceeds to explain that the very ritual of removing a vinyl from its case and carefully placing it onto the turntable, and the mindful sensory pleasure he derives from this, give him purpose and, just something to do in a way time-saving conveniences never could. There is no need for him to save time. What he needs is to fill it up in order to savor and give meaning to it, and thus his life. And ultimately, that kind of ritualized, mindful approach to things, hobbies, life, certainly holds value and relevance to the rest of us mortals, trapped as we are in the rat race of end-stage neoliberal capitalism. Though I suppose it would indeed also have a certain tragic undertone for someone who cannot die. Finally, the book looks at the experience of profound isolation, loneliness, and the need we all have to belong somewhere with kin. Yes, even when you're an immortal 80,000 years old man, prone to supernatural fits of murderous rage, as it so happens. Yu Newt desperately wants to find someone else like him, true kin, and it's one of, if not the biggest driving force in his life. Well, that and eventually finding a way to ditch his immortality. At any rate, it's the reason why he loves that immortal Babirusa so much. Because, yes, it is a kind of love. A kind of brotherly love, even. It's the reason why he keeps chasing down rumors of a woman who brings inanimate objects to life, a potential counterpart to his powers of death, throughout the centuries, throughout the millennia. And I'll say more because spoilers. Being immortal and, not having a posse of vampires, because that's always how it goes with media that play around with vampires. Anyway, being immortal, it turns out, is very lonely. Having near-perfect recall, yes, Yu Newt also possesses a supernaturally enhanced eidetic memory of 80,000 years worth of lived experiences, is very lonely. Loving people, in spite of everything, who inevitably die and leave you behind, in a way, over and over and over again, is incredibly bloody lonely. It doesn't matter that Yu Newt resolves not to succumb to the never-ending grief of these losses, over and over and over again, it all inevitably takes a very heavy toll on him. Alone as he is, Yu Newt doesn't want, he needs to find his kin somewhere, someday, especially if he never finds a way to become mortal. And I could definitely empathize with his feelings of isolation and loneliness, to a large extent, yes, though obviously my case has never been as extreme or hopeless as his. Thank all the gods above and below. Now, don't get me wrong, none of these themes were explored with that much depth, and I'd heartily recommend checking out some of Mieville's other works to see what he can really do with ideas-driven fiction writing, and specifically SFF fiction writing. But for a book that was essentially commissioned by someone else and extrapolated from a basic idea he didn't choose nor develop of his own volition, I was very pleasantly surprised to see how genuinely thoughtful it all turned out to be. That's the crux of it, really. I was pleasantly surprised by this book. I went in with very managed expectations, fearing the worst in terms of disinterest and boredom, and found an engaging and properly thoughtful solidly 7 out of 10 story about an immortal warrior and an immortal deer pig. Never thought I'd say those words out loud, but there you have it. And that concludes my, on the shorter side of things, a little review of the Book of Elsewhere, co-written by China Mieville and Keanu Reeves. I hope you found it interesting, entertaining, engaging, you know, all those good things. And on that very final note, I hope you'll have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. Do take a good care of yourselves. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you all reasonably soon in the next video, but until then, bye-bye!